It was in the first century. Emperors, Bernice, were on the throne who were committed to turning things backwards. The people of God got weary. Some wanted to go back rather than press forward. The Apostle Paul himself got weary. But in his weary moments, he decided to preach. And to the Hebrews who were considering turning back, he said in the 10th chapter of Hebrews, "Let me remind you who and whose you are." He declared, with emperors on the throne that like to put their names on buildings and had narcissistic attitudes about who they could rule, Caesars who controlled the Senate and were funded deeply by the money of ancient Rome. He said, "Let me tell you who you are and whose you are." And in that 10th chapter, around about the 30th verse, 38th verse, he said, "The just shall live by faith." And then he said, "I know you feel tired. I know you're concerned about tomorrow, but remember who you are, because you can't help a schizophrenic nation if you don't know who you are." He said, "We are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen." I heard from some reading that was one of the scriptures, Bernice, of your father. Last night he was with us, according to the testimony. He was grieving, your father. He was grappling when he gave his last sermon in Memphis. He didn't get to preach the one, "America May Go to Hell," but it was on the docket. He was hurting despite a declared war on poverty. He saw America's great wealth going to wage war against brown people in Vietnam. He was grieving because, in the language of the new report from the Kerner Commission, America's cities were burning because we were a schizophrenic nation moving toward two societies: one black, one white, one separate and unequal. He was grieving because, despite the incredible demonstration of the nonviolent power in the civil rights movement, the movement was fragmenting under the pressures of competing ideologies and the counterintelligence operations waged against them and him by Hoover and the FBI. While he was grieving, he decided to preach that last night. Not a lecture, but a sermon deep down in his soul. And in the midst of that, he was honest with us and gave us the cure. He said, the nation is sick. And yet he's also said, in midst of sickness, God is at work. He said that we must build multicultural alliances, multiracial alliances, that come together where the desperate and the destitute and all come together to stand against the injustices that were yet hounding the reality of the American process. And then he said, right now, when you're at your most worried, nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn around at this point. That's what Dr. King said. Facing the contradictions of his day, facing the fact of an extremist government probably being elected that year. And here we are, we need to hear those words. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn around at this point, because we see that schizophrenia yet on the move. On the one hand, Lady Liberty's statue stands in the harbor, beckoning the tide and the huddled masses who are longing to be free, but at the same time, people who say they love freedom are talking about mass deportation. And the truth is, the rules that they're talking about using, if they were used 100 years ago, their own grandmamas couldn't have got in the country. On the one hand, every public official, particularly in the Congress, swears to uphold the Constitution, put their hand on the Bible and swear to establish justice and promote the general welfare. But after they swear, they pass laws that prey, P-R-E-Y, on the very people who need justice the most. And when you look at the disparate impact of those policies, you wonder if they know what's in the Constitution or what's in the Bible. They use either trickle-down economics or neoliberalism. Both of them, as Pope Francis has said, create a kind of magical evil that does not address the issues of our time. Here we are talking about saving TikTok, and we haven't saved 140 million poor folk in this country yet. Did you know that poverty now, that it's 140 million, 43% of the nation, 51% of our children, 60% of black folk are poor and low wealth. That's 26 million people. 30% of white people are poor and low wealth. That's 66 million people. And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to poverty, if you can't pay your light bill, we all black in the dark. And if your children don't have anything to eat, they don't growl white, their stomachs don't growl black, they growl hungry. Did you know that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death in America today? Yes, we remember Brother Cornelius Taylor, who died just across the street. But let me also tell you, 800 people died yesterday from poverty. It's one of our worst forms of policy murder. 800 people died yesterday from poverty. 250,000 will die this year from poverty. In the midst of this schizophrenia, one moment we have child tax credit, the next moment we take it back. We haven't raised the minimum wage since 2009, $7.25 an hour, $2.13 an hour for tipped workers. The March on Washington called for the minimum wage to be raised by 75 cents, which would have been about $18 an hour today. 52 million people, Americans, make less than $15 an hour, and in 2021, every Republican and 8 Democrats blocked an increase to the federal minimum wage, but I bet you they raised their salaries. Here we are talking about buying Greenland. We better pay people what they deserve. $100 million Americans have medical debt burdens, Bernice. 7 million families were behind in their rent in December of 2023. 700,000 people are homeless. Millions are on the brink of homelessness. And when we look at these realities, we have to say that in some ways today, the nation is still sick, because the nation has not fully got over the infection of poverty, racism, and militarism. And in this moment, we must remember whose we are. and who we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Somebody ought to look at your neighbor and say, do you know who you are? And I heard somebody today say about the coming inaugural in an hour or so, that somebody had won a mandate. Well, first of all, less than 50% of the vote is not a mandate. Only 49.9% of the vote is not a mandate. But I don't care who you are, if you win by 60% of the vote, you never win a mandate to violate justice. You never win a mandate to hurt people with your power. And so we come today to remember Dr. King, but more so to recommit ourselves to the Spirit, to the commitment that we will, every day we got life in our bodies, tell America who she's supposed to be, whether she listens or not. We don't come here with a dark message, but we come here with a determined message, not with a hateful message, but a hopeful message. We come in a tradition that knows that the right time to tell the truth is always right now, and that telling the truth is the most radical and prophetic moral action you can take in a season of lies. We come here in a tradition that remembers that we cannot stop until the poor are lifted, until the sick are healed, until humanity is respected, until our children are educated and protected, until civil rights and union rights are never neglected, until love overcomes hate. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn around at this point. This is no time to be at ease in Zion. We must go forward together, black and white and brown and Asian and native and young and old and north and south and east and west and gay and straight. We are America, and we must declare we ain't going nowhere but forward. That's because we know who we are. We come from a tradition. In 1854, when the Supreme Court ruled that a black man had no right, or black people had no right that white people had to respect, Frederick Douglass said, perhaps this decision, as monstrous as it is a necessary link in the chain of events to the whole downfall of slavery. Therefore, let it embolden and intensify our agitation. Somebody asked Harriet Tubman, what do you think about the decision of the Supreme Court? She said, is God dead? When women didn't have a voice, black and white women joined together, and they stayed in the struggle, and they didn't turn around. When black and white coal miners in Appalachia faced the vicious and violent corporate bosses who hired planes to drop bombs on them from the sky in 1920. They didn't turn around, but they declared with Mother Jones that they would fight until hell freezes over and then fight on the ice. When greedy robber barons tried to work children until their fingers were mangled by machines, the social gospel movement didn't turn back. Walter Rauschenbusch, who actually helped inform Dr. King, they asked, which side are you on? And they joined with a crippled president named Roosevelt and walked this nation out of depression. And he said, the only thing you got to fear is fear itself. And they didn't turn back. When lynching and segregation looked like it had made white supremacy a national doctrine, white and black and Jewish people built civil rights organizations. They raised up Charles Hamilton Houston and Ella Baker and Pauli Murray and Thurgood Marshall and so many others to shake the foundations. When racists shot and mutilated Emmett Till, Rosa Parks didn't turn back. She went to Highland and learned how to engage in nonviolent action, came back to Montgomery and sat down that a movement might stand up. When Democrats, Dixiecrats, and moderate Republicans were slow and racist Dixiecrats were extreme, Bayard Rustin and Philip Randolph and others with Dr. King called the people to go forward together at the March on Washington. They won the Civil Rights Act. When the country refused to honor the 15th Amendment, black people and white people and Jewish and Catholic and Orthodox and Protestant and Muslim and young and old, they faced off Jim Clark in Selma. And they refused to turn around. And when they got to Montgomery, Dr. King stood at the steps of the Alabama State House and turned it into a pulpit. And he said, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. And he turned, he said, his truth, God's truth is marching on. And then he said these words. He says, understand that the greatest fear of a racist oligarchy in this country has always been for the masses of Negroes and the masses of white people that are poor to come together and form a new voting bloc that can fundamentally shift the economic architect of this nation. This is not the time for us to turn around now. We must refuse. We must refuse. Tell your neighbor, we must refuse. We must refuse. We must finish the work. We must finish building out a poor people's campaign. And we must refuse. We cannot turn back now. We are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Well, Bernice, they tell me that your father, when he preached that night, even when he didn't feel like preaching, when he got to the end, the Holy Ghost really took over. And he said, I know we got some difficult days ahead. But mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And I might not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. And you do understand how you see the glory. When you meet hate with love, you can see the glory. When you meet meanness with mercy, you can see the glory. When you meet evil and greed with Sabbath economics of giving, you can see the glory. When you meet lies with the truth, you can see the glory. When you meet treachery with triumphant love, you can see the glory. That's when we see the glory. Oh, hallelujah. One of the writers, Jürgen Moltmann, said, you see the glory when people of faith see things that are wrong and they decide to put their hands and their bodies to work to change that is wrong. That's when hope comes. Hope comes when you go to work. Tell your neighbor, hope comes when you go to work. Tell them, glory will fall on you when you go to work. So I come here to remix Common and to remix John 11. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. One day, when the war is won, we will be sure. Glory, glory, hands to the heaven. No man, no weapon formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Every day, women and men become legend. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is a juxtaposition to us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One day, one son, his spirit is revisiting us. True living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat down on the bus. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. One day, when the glory comes, the war is not over, but we will fight till the finish comes. Tell your neighbor, neighbor, nothing nothing, nothing, absolutely nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn around now, because nothing will keep the glory for coming. One day, the glory shall come. It'll be ours. It'll be ours. It will be ours.
Support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. You heard what we just talked about there. Folks, I can't reiterate this enough. Listen to me clearly. I cannot reiterate this enough. When you've got technology companies running scared, when you've got legacy media not doing their job, when you've got Black-owned media that is disintegrated, now is more than ever for us to have independent media that cares about the truth, that is willing to say what needs to be said. So when you support Roland Martin Unfiltered, this show, when you support the Black Star Network, you're not just supporting me, you're supporting the other shows. Our goal is to add 2 more shows this year. We want additional shows. We want more weekly and daily shows because we want to be able to speak truth to power. We want to be able to say what is necessary where other people are scared. And when you are scared, when you're looking over your shoulder, oh my God, that advertising contract is not going to come in. Well, guess what? A lot of these major ad agencies, they're not even supporting us anyway. You know, in 6 years of doing this show, Group M hasn't done a damn thing with us. Publicis hasn't done anything with us. You've got Horizon, you've got all of these folks, they haven't done jack. And so we are calling it like we see it, and we're speaking truth. And unlike some of these other so-called progressives and people who believe in truth, I'm not running around trying to kiss MAGA ass and kiss Trump's ass. I won't be going to Mar-a-Lago, not for a damn thing. And so this is about us being able to speak truth. So when you support this show and this network with your resources, it is exactly what is happening, because we are trying to build something that is bigger and broader, and actually it has the courage to say what needs to be said, even when it makes other folk uncomfortable. If you want to contribute giving Cash App, use the Stripe QR code. This is it right here. And if you are listening, simply go to blackstarnetwork.com to check it out. Also, if you want to see your check and money order, some of y'all old school, we understand that. See your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 2003 7-0196. PayPal, R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And again, folks, we've got some 4 million social media followers. If only 20,000 of our fans contribute at least $50 each, which comes out to $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day, that's $1 million. It allows us to be able to continue to build, to add these shows and do the work that's required. So your support is needed. So please join our Bring the Funk fan club today. If you've not already joined, if you have given to us in the past, please renew your commitment, because it's important that we support Black-owned media, because Black-owned media matters.